All right, let's talk about a term we hear thrown around all the time, OCD. Today, we're going to peel back all the stereotypes and the jokes to really get at the heart of what it means to live with this condition. Let's dive in. But first, before we get into the definitions, I just want you to sit with this quote for a second. This comes from someone living with OCD. This isn't about being quirky or liking things neat. This is about real, deep, life-changing pain. Listen to those words: ruined, haunts, eats me up. That is the real voice of OCD.
So that really begs the question, right? If it's not about loving a clean house or a perfectly organized desk, then what on earth is obsessive-compulsive disorder? Let's break it down.
Okay, so first things first, we have to clear up the biggest misunderstanding right off the bat, because what most people casually call OCD is usually something totally different.
You know, when you hear someone say, "Ugh, I'm so OCD about my bookshelf," or "he's totally OCD with his email inbox," yeah, they're almost certainly not talking about obsessive-compulsive disorder. What they're actually describing are traits of a completely separate condition.
And here is the absolute key difference. It all comes down to two fancy-sounding words: ego-dystonic versus ego-syntonic. With real OCD, the thoughts are dystonic, meaning they're totally against your values. They feel like an alien invader in your brain, and you would do anything to make them go away. But with OCPD, or obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, the traits are syntonic. They make sense to you. You genuinely believe your super organized way is the right way, and frankly, everyone else should get on board. See the difference? One is a prison, the other is a preference. So to really get what OCD is, you have to understand its two main parts, the O and the C. They are completely tangled up with each other: obsessions and compulsions. Let's start with the obsessions. Now, these are not your everyday worries, not even close. Think of them as mental terrorists. They are intrusive, they barge into your mind without permission. They are unwanted, you hate them and you fight them. And they are persistent. They just keep coming back and back and back, cranking up your anxiety to an unbearable level.
And these obsessions can latch on to literally anything. Yeah, sure, sometimes it's about germs or needing things to be perfectly symmetrical, but it can also be deeply, deeply disturbing stuff. Taboo thoughts about sex or religion or violent harm coming to your loved ones. Can you just imagine your brain forcing you to see an image of hurting someone you love over and over, even though it's the last thing in the world you'd ever want? That's the horror of an obsession.
So what do you do when your mind is screaming at you? When you're drowning in that anxiety? Well, that's where compulsions come in. These are the rituals, either things you do with your body or things you do in your head that you feel you absolutely have to perform to try and calm that storm. But here's the cruel trick of OCD. This is the trap. The obsession screams, creating this massive wave of anxiety. You do the compulsion, wash your hands, check the lock, say a silent prayer, and for a split second, you feel better. The anxiety goes down. But that relief, it's a complete illusion. All it does is teach your brain that the ritual works. So the next time the obsession comes back, and it always comes back, it's even stronger. It's a brutal, vicious cycle.
Okay, so now that we have a real sense of how this works, let's use that knowledge to just completely demolish the three biggest myths that are out there about OCD. We're going to tackle these one by one. This idea that it's all about control, the belief that you can always see it happening, and maybe the most damaging one of all, that you can just use willpower to make it stop. All right, reality check number one. OCD is the exact opposite of being a control freak. Someone with OCD feels completely, terrifyingly out of control. It feels like their own brain has been hijacked by a hostile force. They don't feel empowered by their thoughts. They are tormented by them. Calling it a need for control just totally misses the sheer terror of that powerlessness.
And this brings us to the second myth. We tend to think of OCD as physical things, right? Hand washing, checking, tapping. But some of the most exhausting, life-consuming compulsions are completely invisible. They happen entirely inside a person's head, which means someone can be going through absolute hell, fighting a silent war, and you'd have absolutely no idea. So what does that actually look like? Well, it could be someone who has to silently repeat a safe phrase 10 times to cancel out a bad thought. Or someone who spends hours mentally replaying their entire day, step by step, to prove to themselves they didn't accidentally hurt someone. Think about that. From the outside, they just look like they're spacing out. But inside, they're running a marathon.
And that leads us to the third myth, the one that does the most harm. Telling someone with OCD to just stop it is not just useless, it's actually cruel. It's like telling someone with a migraine to just think it away. You're telling them that their debilitating neurological condition is actually a personal failing, a lack of willpower. It piles shame on top of suffering and makes it so much harder for them to ask for the help they desperately need. So when you put it all together, you see the real picture. OCD isn't a funny quirk or a personality trait. It's an invisible, exhausting, and often terrifying battle against your own mind. And this chart just lays it out so clearly. The misconception is that it's a quirk, a choice, a preference for cleanliness. The clinical reality is that it's a disorder, driven by intrusive thoughts and involuntary compulsions. The casual phrase, "I'm so OCD," is the polar opposite of what a person suffering is actually thinking, which is, "Please, I wish this would just stop." So why am I harping on this? Why does getting this distinction right actually matter so much? It matters because every time we use OCD as a punchline for being neat, we're pouring a little bit of acid on the reality of someone who is truly suffering. We're making their invisible illness even more invisible. It minimizes their pain, it makes it harder for them to be taken seriously by doctors or family, and it deepens their sense of isolation because it tells them that nobody really gets what they're going through. So here's the bottom line. Our words create the world we live in. By taking a moment to understand what this disorder really is, the fear, the powerlessness, the fight, we can start to change the conversation. We can move from jokes to empathy, from misunderstanding to support, and we can make the world just a little bit kinder for the people fighting this battle every single day.